Hello everybody. I don't know what this is gonna be. I don't even know if this is gonna be put on the internet. I don't know if I'm gonna put any of this out there. I don't know if anybody's gonna watch it, and I also don't know if it's really worth anything. But I think it is, so I'm gonna go for it. I think this is mostly motivated by what I see online as far as um the rollout, the information lead up, and then the invasion in Ukraine. I think there's a lot going on that really needs to be at least said, um, just so the future knows that we knew. If not, something might be done about it. I don't even know. I don't think anything is really going to be done about it except for, slaughter. The meat grinder is just going to keep churning. But if we're going to talk about it, I think a lot of what could happen is influenced by what has already happened. So if I can take a moment to back up and look at some other shit that has seemingly nothing to do with this on the outside, but will definitely influence it in the future and will definitely predict outcomes. So I called this the decentralized autonomous terror at debt cult empire's end, and the ghosts of men who knew too much. So it's a little wordy, but the intersection between a decentralized autonomous executive function within our political and industrial and militarily financed orchestra of control, I think can lead to outcomes that nobody wants, but will kind of ensure that they do happen. Um, so the causal mechanic for the United States owner class, the class that runs the United States, their super imperialism, some people might call it. I'm not talking to you. All right. God damn, dude. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Yeah. So the owner class that runs America, the people that run this shit, they need to protect their interests in the future. Okay. So they ensured that um, after World War II, this can really pick up after World War II. We can go back World War One, doesn't really matter. But World War II, I think, is really when, if we're gonna start drawing lines and connections and make doors that mean anything, instead of like, well, what if we didn't make the Germans pay reparations? Blah blah blah. What if we didn't have bad relations with the Japanese? Like, okay, let's work from somewhere a little bit more recent that can actually have some sort of attributable results. Okay, so World War II ends, and they need to coordinate all the countries together to make some sort of alliance to control the future, right? Makes sense. There's a super nationalism. They just defeated the Germans, at least most of them, right? Um, Germany hasn't, West Germany is still a thing, but as far as the global leaders and powers are concerned, they can definitely start setting precedent. They can chop up territories that weren't necessarily previously controlled or were previously controlled. They can now take ownership of those valuable lands. Look at Palestine, uh, what they call Israel. Um, so there are certain things that are instituted. One of those, and the biggest one, is a super imperialism instituted with finance and currency and manipulating instruments of uh, financial institutions for profitable, easily predicted outcomes. Okay. You can really look anywhere in any industry and you'll find some sort of effect generated after World War II that hadn't necessarily been there before. Chief of which is the United States basically securing trade between most countries and making a permissive environment for insurance companies to insure cargo and global trade. It opened up a lot of doors for labor markets to be exploited, chiefly in the global South. That's what a lot of people like to call it. But South America, as far as their natural resources are concerned, a lot of the United States military was devoted to securing profitable landscapes from the native peoples, the indigenous peoples in South America, for companies, U.S. companies. And this also migrated over to China. China was then taken away from Russia's interwoven future with this network of trade relationships, okay, that were built up over decades. And then South Korea was brought into the family after the Korean War with the Chinese. Okay. Basically, bringing all that up to say that finance was the method that they did it. They didn't have to make a steel storm to take over and shoot everybody to do it. They just made it really profitable and really economically viable to become part of the family. Okay. And this is, to back into this, it's entirely human. So the hordes of centralized capital, mainly intellectual property, mainly new developments in technology, were then able to be produced outside of the homeland in other countries for cheaper because of exploited labor, resource pools, and resources in general. So those hordes of the centralized technological capital manifest inevitably, at least we now know, godlike computational power alongside medieval managerial institutions, and those institutions get serviced by peasant inmates on a global surveillance state plantation. So the entire world effectively becomes one giant plantation serviced with the inmates that run it. Everybody beneath the top 1%, they get fucked, basically. And they're in a constant state of pulling each other back to secure resources to finance small family endeavors. Nothing close to what would be needed to run, let's say, a multinational corporation. The capital finance and the capital generation no longer are seated with the bottom vast majority of people. They're all localized and funneled upward to a small minority of people that then ensure that future is under their control. It's a constant causal effect game that they have a logical endpoint, which is making sure that they exist in the future and that whatever developments happen now are exploited for their further control. It'll have nothing to do with distributing a decentralized computational platform that would raise the voice of the people, raise the power of the people. Facebook will inevitably court the intelligence agency to attract Department of Homeland Security professionals, national security professionals, intelligence agents, essentially, and to develop intelligence assets, which, if you look at the history of what America as a bureaucratic institution wants to do, they want to infiltrate the natural movements that do occur and then either disrupt them, such as certain leftist farmer movements, Occupy Wall Street, certain movements within social spaces like They will drop in instigators and provocateurs to burn down a certain city block or start certain window breaking, and basically function as agents of a state that doesn't really care about what happens so long as it positively ensures their future. Um, and because we're all so interconnected with these devices, they can effectively suck in all the data that happens. And instead of recording it, like how, there's this thing where they'll review they'll reveal part of the method without necessarily revealing the implications. So um, everybody's fundamentally aware that our phones are spying on us, right? And it's like, oh gee, the ad placement was way too specific. It had way too specific markers for somebody within my local family. It might have certain specific markers for some of my friends that it's geolocated to. We hang out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We talk about certain things. Those creepy things manifest every day in our life, and we're all well aware of it. But the higher order implication of that is that because the companies that are providing us advertisements know so much about us, so too would the government have an extremely vested interest in at least monitoring and affecting certain change within those industries. It's too valuable to ignore. So there are data centers in Utah that are related with the internet service providers, and those are effectively National Security Agency data farms. But the concept that they want you to get tripped up on is that there's like somebody sitting there, like the Simpsons thing where they're like sitting behind a thing listening to bullshit conversation all day. And one of them goes, oh, I got one. I've got some shit on here. That's not how that works. Essentially, all of the data is converted into smaller and smaller relevant bits of information. So your words per minute can be calculated. And then if that's too low, you're not necessarily worth even monitoring on a higher level. Your word complexity, that will also be determined with a simple numerical value. So what is an extremely complicated data set that would look totally unmanageable to a certain level of computational power would seem useful. So pulling the calculus out of certain metrics is actually extremely valuable if you want to pinpoint exactly who you need to target. So part of that targeting involves classification and definitions being rolled out. So you have new classifications, new definitions for domestic terrorists being unrolled. You have new classifications of what type of citizen you are based on your proximity or knowledge of certain industries or capabilities. So your knowledge of firearms can easily be logged and tracked without you ever admitting that you ever own anything or that you know how to make anything or that you know people in your past that know things that could help you. It's quantifiable in a terrifying way. And with the rise of artificial intelligence, if you're not shitting yourself, you aren't paying attention. These artificial intelligences, when they're exposed to certain data sets and vast data sets, they can chew through and digest so much more than you could ever possibly know. We're going to get to the point where everything you've said and done near a phone or a computer can easily be referenced and replicated, and a digital clone of yourself. If this isn't already happening right now, it will happen. A digital sim of yourself based on everything you've ever done near a phone. Everybody you've ever interacted with near a phone will be logged, categorized, and set in a digital world, a digital matrix devoted specifically to determining the future. And especially if this gets more and more granular and more instantaneous, the calculus that can be scooped out of vast sets of data is just staggering. Especially if you have certain targeted individuals high up in certain industries. Their phones need to be completely separated from them. There's going to have to be a whole new security protocol for every single digital operation ever for everybody. Because this is going to manifest in weaponized AI devoted to entirely to figuring out what you're going to do, what you think, who you know, and what you're capable of. So to reiterate, the intelligence agencies have certain protocols that they theoretically have to abide by that don't actually exist. One of those is digital privacy, and I'm sure we all know that intrinsically, that at some level we are all being spied on. But as far as there being an ability for us to do anything about it, that's all theoretical. That's non-existent. That's, if not benign, a weapon to be used against you. Secondarily to that is your ability to access new information. So we saw with 2016 and Donald Trump, whatever your political aspirations or leanings are, he was not the candidate when that first started. On the outside, the political support was probably for Bernie Sanders, and Hillary Clinton was the anointed one to win the race, and so they needed an ostensibly foolish character, and so the media focused on that and gave him an inordinate amount of airtime. And this was coordinated with intelligence individuals. This coordination goes extremely deep, in so much as the real threat to the Democratic Party was not Donald Trump, it was Bernie Sanders. And had they chose him in the primary, there's a good argument to be made that a lot of the people that voted for Donald Trump probably would have voted for him instead. But Hillary Clinton, being such a hateable, villainous character, made it easy for a segment of the population to exist that wasn't accounted for. And so in retrospect, the intelligence agencies and operatives within the democratic state felt it necessary to limit and control the spread of information on the internet, more so than they had already done. They figured that it was a Russian troll farm disinformation campaign that led to his election, and not the Democrats cutting out the Midwest and deindustrializing the Midwest and sending off permanent normal trade relations with China. They had to blame it on something. So they picked the little people. They picked the people most affected by their policies and most pissed off at them. And instead of trying to understand them, instead of trying to bring them back into the family, back into the fold, they became undesirable portions of the population. And because they became undesirable portions of the population, they were then recategorized. And you see that with Biden coming into office. There is a recategorization of threat vectors. Part of those threat vectors are quoted as being white supremacists, such as the Boogaloo Boys. Boogaloo Boys are silly, but they're not white supremacists. That was a Department of Homeland Security narrative trotted out after the Boog Boys all coordinated online. And so then there was a classification and a reason to target them. And then poof, the Boog is now meme material. They don't do anything. They don't organize. They don't exist because they were deleted and because they were the target of an intellectual campaign. Okay. if you had spoken to any one of them, any of the actual people showing up on the street with weapons, they would say, "Hey, we're here to protect protesters. We're here to ensure some sort of stability outside of the uh, police control." And what they were turned into is a villainous crackpot conspiracy theory group that was worth mocking, which to some degree was always going to be the case. But the change in intelligence was motivated by the Department of Homeland Security. It wasn't motivated by the local populace coming to this conclusion. It was based on their interactions with them. It wasn't based on publications by those individuals. It was based specifically on cables released by major media outlets about the white supremacist nature of them and the conspiracy theorist nature of them. Same thing with Alex Jones. He was debanked and deleted off the internet, and some people feel extremely strongly about what he said. But as far as the motivation for eliminating his voice, that came from the Department of Homeland Security and the National Security Agency. They found a weapon. They found an intellectual weapon to use against him, which was that horrible mass shooting, and they used it as a tool to silence and delete him. And whatever you want to think about how much of a charlatan he is, or if he's right or wrong, it's independent of him being a target of the National Security Agency and him being a target of the State Department. Okay? And their manifestation of their will is to debank him and delete him from the internet. And you can find this through thread through a bunch of different organizations, notably leftist organizations, especially leftist digital organizations. They use the right wing as a false herring to generate support for more domination and control over intellectual concepts and ideas. The spread of certain signals needs to be limited as far as they're concerned. So some of those signals, whether they're right or wrong, are going to be limited because they pose a threat to the existence of the state. You can see that with the Hunter Biden story. The moment that was leaked, there was a coordinated intellectual position that was disseminated across basically every single major media outlet, and that was, this is the result of a Russian information campaign. This had nothing to do with Joe Biden's son being corrupt and smoking a shitload of crack on camera and forgetting his laptop. No, this was, one, fake, two, not worth investigating, and three, if you did investigate it and did find that it was true, the only reason that it's being brought to your attention is because of Russian disinformation, not because it's a valuable story to discuss and understand and investigate. And this ties into Ukraine, especially with Hunter Biden's relationship with petrochemical companies and petrochemical investments in Ukraine. Okay, this ties into so many different narratives that it's actually kind of sickening if you really were to follow each and every single one of them. Joe Biden specifically orchestrated a campaign in Ukraine to get his son on Gazprom on the board, getting paid, what was it, like $200,000 a month, something absurd, as a consultant, and that was specifically about pipelines out of Ukraine into Europe. Okay, and why would there be a pipeline out of Ukraine into Europe? Well, because there was just recently discovered a vast petrochemical reserve in the sea, right next to Crimea. Okay, so again, this always comes back to money, resources, control, and the states need to ensure its existence in the future, and that existence is predicated on the leverage that it can manipulate over every single moment. And every single moment is a war of information. So the United States military learned a long time ago that the most effective weapon is psychological. The most effective way to fight your enemy is psychologically. And the only time that doesn't work is when you interact with a psychologically motivated enough enemy that it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how many people you kill, you're always going to be bad, and they're always going to try and fuck with you to get you out of their country. So what happened in Vietnam? They were never going to win that. They were never going to stack enough bodies to win in Vietnam. And that lasted 20 years, and the only reason that we ever pulled out of Vietnam was because it didn't make any financial sense to do so. It had nothing to do with the local populace becoming so enraged that they would burn their draft cards. It became financially and fiscally unfeasible. And we inevitably ended up invading there anyway, with capitalist corporations basically owning most of Vietnam right now. So go to Vietnam, you'll find out. Point being, back to the story. What were we talking about? Money. So yeah, the global surveillance state plantation. It becomes its own progenitor, and it becomes its own enforced prediction. The predictive capacity only exists because it's being enforced. It's not how things would naturally play out. It's how things are playing out because they're being forced to play out that way. And a lot of the power that's manifested right now is computational power. It's data. That's effectively the only thing left to really control on a scale that would win and lose a war. So the effects of this industrial complex are much greater, though, and they demand unavoidable gore. Okay? They demand bodies. They demand misery and suffering, because at some point there's going to be a moment for them to whip out the big swinging dick that they have and smash it on anything and anyone in the way. And that's because the precepts of safety are crafted by the imposed technocratic security state, which is protecting its existence through the alchemy of AI surveillance and fiat debt. And those instruments are left as autonomous and unyielding extermination tools of an unelected global finance gang. So these tools aren't run by you and I. They're not run by the most reasonable, cool-headed people in the room. They're run by a finance gang, a cartel, a group of criminals that don't give a fuck about you, don't give a fuck about the law, don't give a fuck about the outcome of anything except that they are safe, their peers are safe, and they maintain control over the situation. And these people are wretched with criminal deceit, and they're ugly in the truth that they censor. The owner class of the United States violates humanity and profits from the suffocation of our aspirations using a vast, untouchable network of black intelligence operations funded through economic super-imperialism. And it's not limited in scope or scale. These networks are waging war for the conceptual within all of our minds. And it makes our minds disposable because they can be used and abused and discarded for the next generation. Because we're an infrastructure that is disposable to operate their what essentially comes down to labor extraction, an economy of labor extraction. So they have to constantly maintain an ability to extract labor from you. They have to constantly maintain an ability to extract your time and keep you playing into their resource-based game. The moment you figure out how to not play their resource-based game, you are, if not a threat, totally not useful to them. You become a non-factor, an empty space where there could be profit, where you could be used to further a specific outcome. If you own your own land and you produce enough resources on your own land to be independent, you are then not contributing to their game, and which would then reclassify you. If you look at the new domestic terrorism reclassification, that alone, you being distrustful of the government, you trying to finance and fund an independent life with a group of your own peers, that is in and of itself seen as a form of intellectual domestic terrorism, because you threaten that dominance, you threaten that supremacy, and you threaten the outcome of all their plans. If they can't extract tax dollars from you, if they can't extract your sons for war, if they can't extract federal student loans for your kids, if they can't extract debt from you, which ensures that you keep playing the finance game, then you're a threat. You are effectively persona non grata, and you exist above their control, which is totally untenable to predicting the future. If you exist outside of their control, you cannot be predicted. You can move and function and speak and operate totally independently. So if you're crafting a state, it makes sense to try and fuck with you, right? Which is basically what I'm saying. But artificial intelligence, it's got so much power that when you combine it with the panopticon that is our phones and all the CCTV, and all the ISP traffic, and all the internet traffic, when you combine it with all those interconnected computers, those networks have a useful regulatory choke. They can squeeze information into irrelevant bubbles where it won't infect the greater information sphere. And so that makes information and its narrative leverage their final survival weapons that they're wielding in preface to potential nuclear apocalypse. And it's a last wrench to maintain their domination before dissolution. Okay, that's effectively what I'm saying, is managing and manipulating information becomes the final ultimate weapon and tool to maintain future supremacy and future dominance, if that's what you're concerned with. If you're concerned with not playing that game, with not defending your borders, if you're not concerned with paying taxes, like, this doesn't apply to you. But if you're concerned with running a country and running a state and being a manager and using all the information at your discretion, part of that, and a large part of that, which gets larger and larger and larger, is controlling information. So you see YouTube is basically waging war against any gun YouTuber. You're not even allowed to load a magazine on YouTube. You're not allowed to show certain opens and closes of the bolt. It's absurd. It's absolutely, completely unrelated to a reasonable motive, unless your motive is to slowly constrict the flow of information relating to weapons. If that's all you care about, then it makes sense. If the only thing that you care about is some 16, 17, 18-year-old kid online from getting into guns via YouTube, well, then that's all you care about. Because my generation is totally on the other end of that. There's nothing you can say to us that will disarm us. There's nothing that you can say to us from the government that will make us hand over our guns. It's absolutely absurd. Gun ownership becomes more and more of a problem to managerial state regulators, because it does pose a significant barrier to their total control. And they know that they can't go around kicking in doors, taking it from everybody at the same time. They have to do it slowly, and they have to do it methodically, and they have to win a certain amount of intellectual battleground before anybody does anything with a pen, before anybody does anything with a boot kicking in your door. They have to do it with ideas, and they have to wage an intellectual campaign against the new generation. So part of that obviously involves limiting the powerful, popular internet gun creators, and making sure that they know that if they step a foot out of line, their entire work can be deleted at a moment's notice. They can be demonetized at a moment's notice, which should be baked into your game plan anyway. But the domination is there. The supremacy is maintained. The Department of Homeland Security can institute certain intellectual wars and battlegrounds that we can't win because we don't exist in them. Certainly, there's a measure of this in basically everything. Duh. So yeah, the coordinated budgets and the operative budgets of this specific owner class, the class of people that own enough to care about the future as though it were a risk board and not a group of human people, as though it were a game to be played and won. If you're looking at those as like an enmeshed network of financial rat kings, they become like these comically unquenchable absurdities. They become so bloated and unsustainable that that they shouldn't necessarily be respected if the rest of us were running it. Like if we actually had any power, if the little people had any power, or coordinated power right now, they would be in serious trouble. But because they can effectively break up that power and limit it by putting everybody in their own little echo chamber, it prevents a mass mobilization. It prevents mass non-compliance. There's always going to be a solable number of people that are complying. And if you have that, then you maintain your state and you maintain the status quo and business as usual. But their targets become phantoms. They become made up. They start making up targets. So they start generating targets that either didn't exist or only exist because you started kicking around the nest, right? If you're not kicking, you're probably not going to have domestic terrorists. But if you piss off enough people, and if your police indiscriminately murder enough people in the streets and don't get charged for it, and everybody sees it online, and you aren't able to control the spread of the video online, you can have a serious fucking problem. So they're always looking for the next fuse that might lead to that. They're always looking for the next confluence of information that might present a serious threat. And back to the Boogaloo thing, that could have theoretically escalated to a mass network of mobilized people on the streets with weapons, all wearing the same uniform. I mean, it's silly, but it's also something that they had to smash. They had to come in and they had to come up with an intellectual ace in their sleeve and destroy it. So they release narratives. They release screenshots of, oh, these are white supremacists. These are people that want to exterminate certain groups of the population. They had to wage war, and none of it was true, or if a certain percentage of it was true, it was nowhere near what they spoke of. And you can see this manifestation in like the little things and the big things. So big thing, Nord Stream pipeline. That was blown up by American operatives. There's ship records and movements that were online immediately after that happened, which said that we released a small little autonomous drone sub, popped it. We dropped some explosives and popped it. Okay. And that's a major fucking deal. That's a big fucking deal. That has so many different consequences. If everybody's working from the narrative that America did it, the United States did some wet work and fucked with some countries and committed a goddamn act of war under everybody's noses. If that's the narrative jump point, they have problems. So the narrative jump point for them was, well, it could have been Russia. Well, we don't know who did it. It could have been anybody. It could have been an independent group of people, and we're going to start making counter accusations. We're going to deny, we're going to deny, we're going to deny, and then we're going to make more counter accusations. And nobody is really ever going to investigate that. Nobody's ever going to be held responsible for that. There's never going to be a moment where what is ostensibly a war crime is ever going to be prosecuted. Nobody's ever going to pay for it. And if anything, the United States position is increased. Germany's reliance on liquid natural gas from us has only increased. They are now militarizing in a way that they never would have done. And certain explanations don't even matter anymore. Now it's okay for us to talk about in major media outlets that we did do it, but in the immediate moments afterwards, it was not spoken about, and if it was spoken about, it was like, oh, gee whiz, oh my god, guys, who did this? Like, we know who did it, buddy. We know. Why can't you guys admit that? Oh, it's because that would lead to a situation that was undesirable. So instead of looking at this as like a vast network of conspiratorial goons, lizard people, all talking to each other at the exact same moment on their own private little gold cell phones, and they all use like their little diamonds for currency or whatever, and none of our rules make any difference to them. They own the fucking planet. If it talking about it like that is just so reductive, it doesn't have any utility. But talking about it in a way where none of it matters as long as the state gets to maintain or increase its supremacy, that bears fruit, because then we can define it. We can talk about it in a way that matters. We can talk about it in the granular way that it manifests. So certain reporters not asking certain questions in press rooms when they could, or not pressing the issue when they could, that is as much of a manifestation of this financial rat king as anything else. It's all in the details. So yeah, they come up with threats that might get in the way of their war machine, the behemoth supremacy of the dollar-denominated debt, which is really what we're talking about. What we're really talking about is a global currency that has been used to finance wars, that has been used to win wars, has been used to gain and maintain influence where there otherwise would be none. Look at Afghanistan. Something like 80 to 90% of all the opium generated for all the morphine derivatives did come from Afghanistan. And there was a moment where we were paying and protecting those poppy farmers. And there was a long, long stretch of time where we were handing out suitcases of money, suitcases of dollar bills, and paying the entire local population just so that they wouldn't shoot at us. Okay? That was part of the war plan, was handing out cash. Part of the war plan does not involve handing out cash to the people in Ohio. Okay, it's never going to involve handing out cash to all the black people that gave 400 years of labor without anything to show for it. It's never going to involve that, because that would reduce their supremacy. That would reduce their financial control. But if you look at Afghanistan as an unconquered territory with a fuckload of resources and a fuckload of metals and a fuckload of natural utilities that would be super useful if you're gonna, I don't know, move everything to an electrical grid, if you're gonna make the entire world run on renewable batteries, you're going to want to have control over the mines that produce those batteries. You're going to want cobalt. You're going to want all the individual granular pieces, and the money spent to maintain that control is worth it in the outcome. But they've already got control over Ohio. You saw what they did with it. They don't give a fuck. Okay? And it's always going to be like that. It's always going to be like that because each financial entity has a derivative. They have a calculus that simplifies to exactly one thing, and that's extracting money. That's extracting dollar fucking bills. Okay, it doesn't have to do with making sure that you and your children get the fruits and vegetables that you guys need. It's never going to involve any sort of national mobilization where the working class is empowered to make decisions, is empowered to exert control over the future. That's never going to happen as far as they're concerned. As far as their outcome is concerned, business stays as usual. They keep making their fucking money, and you keep playing into it, and they never have to work a day in their life. Except for maintaining control. And that's why Facebook's outcome, Apple's outcome, Google's outcome as an institution is directly related to the United States as a state, as an institution. They're intertwined. They're interwoven. They both have complementary outcomes if they understand each other as supporting each other. So Google will turn over information about you. You do not have privacy. Your internet service provider is providing information to the NSA data harvesting sites in Utah without your consent. You have no ability. You have no ability to turn off 5G if you wanted to. And 5G, another manifestation of this control, the generations of cellular advancements are specifically interwoven with the national security apparatus as a whole. Each generation is specifically has a secondary operative function. Moving from first to second gen phones, that was for location. That was so you couldn't pop off a roadside bomb without getting found. Okay, and then second to third gen, they wanted to harvest the photos. They wanted to harvest your phone's camera, snapshots from your phone's camera. And then fourth gen, that's a complementary matrix. And then fifth gen, they want 5G to monitor every single meter of the country in order to create a simulation that has increasing predictive control. That's the purpose of 5G. Granted, there's secondary considerations based on line of sight with having a house full of shit all interconnected. But its primary function is, with that network, is the ability to see and hear everything. It's a real-time data sync. It's all the data in your country going into one pot, and then you get to put some AIs on it and figure out what's going on and run a localized simulation of what everybody's doing. To to higher and higher degrees of accuracy. And that accuracy is for predictive power. It's not for selling you some shit, even though that's secondary. It's for predicting what you know. It's for predicting who you're going to talk to. It's for predicting what you even would think of being interested in. There's a profile devoted specifically to you that you don't know about. And we're going to get to the point where you could get a phone call from a digital version of yourself, and you'll be able to have a whole conversation with that person. You will be able to intellectually have a stimulating, fun conversation with yourself. And it'll probably sound scarily accurate, and it'll only get more accurate the more it interacts with you, and the more you interact near your computer, and the more information you respond to. Everything. It has to do with everything. So 5G, they front run that narrative with, oh, it's a bunch of conspiracy loon hacks that think that 5G is going to control a nanoparticle in your bloodstream and get you to, I don't know. I don't know what they say. It's just bullshit. It's like the narrative is always like some crackpot idea of a bunch of tinfoil hat dudes in the woods saying that electromagnetic frequencies are bad for you. When really, the electromagnetic frequencies are bad for you if they can be fucking controlled and watched and monitored and manipulated and predicted against. It's not, I don't even think the realm of possibility excludes like them literally being able to read your mind. Like, I think there's gonna get to be a point where there will be a functional relationship between all the frequencies near all the microprocessors, where they will be able to have, with all the other data that they've been pumping into it, that a sufficiently powerful AI will be able to literally fucking read your thoughts. I think that's within a technological generation or two. Maybe not right now, but I think they want to. They want to do that. They don't want to leave that power on the table. They don't want to let you get away with, not being able to have your thoughts read. So it's all moving towards that type of control, that type of understanding, deep understanding. So you can know, say, if Russia does invade, will the population resist? Will we be able to finance Ukraine without popping off a nuclear Armageddon? How willing to sacrifice is Vladimir Putin? Well, like, these are all relevant calculations, and they're distributed everywhere. There's no limit to it. It's not like you being some dumb fuck in the middle of nowhere who doesn't even have access to clean water. It's not like, oh, you're irrelevant because of that. No, you are another metric that is worth at least understanding. So that's where that's leading, is complete and total clairvoyance. And so in the search of that like endless predictive power, centralized capital and its fiat have created a revolutionary security state, where once they needed the storm of steel and bodies to rule the planet and condense resources, financial capital and its web of dollar-denominated debt functions as the keystone of the United States' theoretical technological edge. And capital, as an institution of human owners, is bound by the simple assurance of its future value, and has thus resulted in never-ending technological advancement, further guaranteeing its own survival. Capital and its derivative debts search for securitized invention has manifested now into the rapid genius of artificial intelligence, machines that are capable of learning from their mistakes and creating new versions of themselves in real-time simulations before their complete and total clairvoyance. It's it doesn't stop here. Is the point. And so when you look at that as an external force motivating internal judicial discretion, these computers aid a relatively small and private group of humans to granularly incarcerate any individual's communications at a staggering scale and pace. Every once secret movement, spoken word, and facial expression by every customer citizen is now being interpolated into one single simulation whereby predictive leverage will increase and individual noncompliance will decrease. This assemblage and rapid analysis of tediously detailed information, previously a science fiction fucking pipe dream. Okay, that's the world we live in. This is a literal science fiction pipe dream that is now on the verge of being reality. It can and it is used against the poor or non-compliant for profit or power. It is now nearly impossible to casually communicate with the express assurance of privacy, as every nearby computer logs human speech for monetizable data and threat vectors. And without legislative counters, private autonomy and secret discretionary noncompliance with state regulation will become totally impossible. You're not going to be able to get away with the small little infractions, jumping over the turnstile. New York's going to make $1 billion fucking police budget devoted to not letting you jump that fucking turnstile, okay? It's not going to be to go after the finance tycoons that now own part of Manhattan through a bunch of criminal, illegal, murderous shit. They're not going to do that. That's not their job, buddy. It's to keep you in control and every single inmate that's running that plantation in line. Okay? And I'm sure you know that. I don't know. Hopefully you know that. So I don't know, man. I read a couple books about the JFK assassination, and I really don't want to drill way too deep on that because I feel like there are a lot of other sources that do that storyline justice and will provide powerful context that I can't possibly provide. But the context that I can provide is pretty singular. Intelligence operatives got away with a coup in broad daylight. They killed the president of America and brought in their guy because of certain things they didn't like. It had nothing to do with JFK being a bad guy. It had nothing to do with JFK doing the wrong thing as far as we're concerned. Okay? What it did have to do with was JFK threatening their supremacy. What it did have to do with is there was a network of mafia criminal heads, mafia operatives, people in the criminal underworld, which is a totally separate thing that in United States intelligence operatives have been using for a long time. The Traficante, Santo Traficante and Nicaragua, instituting a coup in Venezuela and Bolivia, all financed with drug money, all financed with illicit money that couldn't have come from Congress. It's part of their plan is to use black money for black operations to get away with it, especially to compartmentalize every single bit of that so that even if one person does flip, they don't know enough to put the whole network together. And so JFK wanted to break up the intelligence agencies. They were operating outside of his purview, and they were doing things that he wanted to stop. And if he could have had his way, like he said, he would have cast them into the wind, broken them up into a billion little pieces. And so they shot him in the face, because that works. Because shooting the president in the face and then getting away with it makes him more powerful. Uh, and so there's a lot of evidence that suggests that, one, they do maintain patsies. They maintain a categorized log of people that can be used for their purposes. Patton Oswalt, he said he was a patsy immediately. He's like, I'm a patsy. The bullet that they recovered was clearly not a used bullet. The magic bullet. There's a picture of a man raising an umbrella on a clear day right before the shot or multiple shots go out. And there was also reports that he would be in danger. And the security detail that was around him did not want him to go down that path. They had already elaborated that it was unsafe. And they went down that way anyway. And I think the takeaway from that isn't that necessarily somebody got away with a coup. Isn't that there was some nefarious 10, 20, 40, 100 people associated with intelligence operatives or people under the payroll of intelligence operatives. I don't think, I mean, that matters, but what I think does matter is that we don't live in the world where that was ever prosecuted. We don't live in a world where that was ever investigated sufficiently to provide a clairvoyant, comprehensive view of the situation. And we know that because the investigation that did go into it has not had details of it released to the public. There are certain details that were supposed to be released to the public that have not been. And the only conclusion that you can really come to is that the evidence or associated evidence points to intelligence operatives killing the president. And it means they got away with it. And when you analyze these networks, when you look into who owns what and who gets paid, where the money comes from, who's printing the money, who has a vested interest in having a say in what happens to the interest rates, who gets the free money helicopter payout, it starts to make sense. It starts to instead of being like this like crackpot, lizard people from a different dimension thing that I think they front run to try and as another part of their intellectual campaign against the notion that there is a group of people and they are running shit and they do have a motive and they do coordinate and they do plan and they do communicate and they do have interests that are completely outside of anything you would ever think, one, possible or moral or even reasonable. It's just a different level, And I think artificial intelligence, the way it's kind of escaped the lab, I think that signals that they're starting a new technological revolution, and that's going to be implementing all the data that they do have in a new way that makes them more powerful, increases their supremacy over the future, increases their ability to dominate and leverage and subjugate everybody that doesn't have access to that. Yeah. I mean, you look at the Twitter files. There's a specific institutional leaning within Twitter that's pretty evident. It's pretty liberal left, like shit lib type of left, not like Marx left, but like brunching Karen that I don't know, doesn't want to really get too messy with things. Like, and that makes them perfect instruments for the Biden campaign, which then is able to say, "Hey, this is a national security threat. We need you to delete the president. You need to make him quiet. That story about Hunter Biden, we got to get rid of that, dude. We gotta. Hey, I need you to check these out. Oh, handled. Oh yeah, we got that handled. Like that's how banal it is. Hey, a couple stories we need you to handle. Oh, okay. It's not like you would ever know about that. It's not like you would ever be able to do anything about that if you did find out, right? Because we did find out, and nobody's doing anything about it. Except talking about it, I guess. Yeah, man. I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, okay. Back to Ukraine. So, so Ukraine is disgusting. Um, for for reasons that I haven't seen discussed. I haven't seen anybody really like acknowledge what's going on. Um, it's kind of like it's like support for the Avengers, you know, like it's very loose. It's very like conceptual. Um, I know I'm the only one that has seen the videos in my local group. I mean, nobody really wants to see it. Nobody wants to talk about that, and that's fine. But it's like the people that are dying over there aren't spoken about like they were regular people. Um, on the one hand, the Russians that are dying over there, they're in here in this country, they're spoken about like they're yeah, okay, well, shouldn't have gone there. Don't go there. Yeah, of course you died. Uh, you deserve to get your ass beat, which is understandable. Um, but it's never in the context of poor people fighting poor people for someone else's game. Um, it's almost like the shorthand justification of just piles of bodies is like just how it is. Yeah, this is just what it's gonna be like. We're not gonna live in a world where there isn't a 500,000 man pile, which is really disgusting. And I think part of the calculus for financing them makes sense, but there's a secondary component to it, which comes into the drone warfare. Um, the United States military is looking at this as a payday. This is such a juicy payday. This is a potentially decades long payday that should not be avoided. If how they see it, if Russia wins, then Poland's next. Um, and if that happens, there's a nuclear exchange. And if Russia loses, there might be a coup. There might be a decapitatory strike. There might be Ukraine might launch missiles deep into the Russian homeland. I think they did do that already. But as far as like longer range missiles being employed to hit larger and larger logistics targets, which would then cause a nuclear exchange. Um, so they see it as a ticket to keep the ball rolling. Uh, Same thing with Afghanistan. That was a ball that kept rolling and kept rolling and kept rolling and could not be stopped, because the people that were put into power that theoretically might have a opportunity to stop it didn't. Um, the advisors around Obama were all industry operatives. They all have a financial and prestige opportunity to maintain and embolden their career, which is why the area outside of DC is populated primarily with a bunch of wealthy people that made their money from the war on terror. Um, they made a shitload of money. And I think those manifestations are going to cause an outcome that could and should be avoided. If cooler heads were prevailing from the working class, the outcome would not necessarily benefit the military-industrial complex. If the working class, the poor working class especially, um, knows that there's a lot of financial games being played with their tax dollars and with the military, um, if they don't have an opportunity to exert their control, then it doesn't matter that they know. But if they know and they have an ability to exert some sort of control, there's less opportunity for profit. There's less opportunity for supremacy. Um, and so some of these technologies that are being employed are older. HIMARS is from the 80s. That's older. A lot of the older uh, armored vehicles provided are going to be listed, at least from us, as their full ticket value or what the full ticket would cost to replace, when really it's not worth that money. And secondly, the money that they do claim on that, they then get to spend on new systems. So it's a ball that will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are no win conditions that they're going to list. Same thing with Iraq and Afghanistan. The win conditions were never enumerated and were never described. Was it the total domination of Saddam's army? Okay, that happened fucking immediately. Was it to institute democracy? Okay. Didn't go in there to do that. Why are we doing that? Never going to work. Also, the way of going about this is just so insane. Um, but it was a ball that didn't stop. And it was a ball that a lot of us knew should be stopped and said it should be stopped and tried stopping and tried organizing against and tried manifesting some sort of leverage over and tried getting the bodies to stop be stacked. And it just didn't. Um, yeah. Where was I? Bu- 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 So yeah, whatever. CIA assets dedicated to the assassination of Fidel Castro. They wanted to take over Cuba again. There was a group of immigrants, Spanish immigrants, that were forced to flee Cuba and come to America and parts of South America, and they wanted to take over Cuba from Fidel. They wanted to kill Fidel, and they wanted to own Cuba for themselves. And they weren't able to do that because he had so much popular support. They tried so many times. Um, but that's where those intelligence assets, that's how they were initially coordinated, it was for the assassination of Fidel. It was for uh, organizing goon squads for an assassination. And then it manifested autonomously as an assassination of the president. It was the state trying to coordinate a goon squad for something else, and then they became autonomous. Maybe they weren't, but they operated autonomously, and they executed the president, and they got away with it. Because the admission that they did do that would have been totally countervalent to their interests. So, of course, they had to redact that and could not admit that. Um, and so that sowed further the already deeply seated ties between intelligence agencies and internal criminal organizations. And those seeds sprouted with the obvious assassination of JFK. Um, so yeah, the relation and function of intelligence assets, foreign or domestic, secret and criminal, under the guise of security, for purposes of unipolar capitalist supremacy, has escalated beyond simple assassination and cover-up. The autonomous and self-interested computational Damocles hung about the neck of every citizen of the planet is now supremely unmoored by human contemplation, only further enabling rogue executive function outside of publicly acknowledged operation. So even if it did happen, it's not going to be acknowledged. And even if it did happen and you know about it, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it because it's going to be autonomous. It's going to happen without human contemplation intervening in certain scenarios where it should. And instead of a tool for liberation, computational might is increasingly censored and limited by monopolistic interests aligned with the state, pursuing submission to passive, private data collection methods, sanitized mass platforms of monetizable consumption, and raw extermination. This financial cartel's leverage against the future and states' devotion to securing its safe passage to the future are now indistinguishable from each other. The planned permanent bondage of all small people on the global plantation, whose independence is industrially classified and regulated out of existence under the pretext of preventing danger, is now closer to inevitable formality than imagination. Capital, aided by state interests, has crafted a surveillance matrix, orchestration, to prevent any existential crises. The oversight is necessarily autonomous at many levels and allows for immediate suppression, exploitation, or domination of targeted speech and organized resistance through bot narrative production and synthetic intellectual swarm conflict. And worse yet, clustering, loitering, drone munitions, making real-time decisions have already taken their first enemies of the state. The first domestic robotic execution of an American citizen was nearly a half decade ago. And the first on foreign soil, and all foreign bodies stacked by drone munitions have long been posthumously categorized as enemy combatants, legally disintegrated for proximity to a target. So just because they were close means they were okay to vaporize. And that's the legal position of the United States government. A 90% civilian casualty rate is legal. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to wrap it up. This is our garden, right? It's not their garden. It's our garden. That garden has a resource of independent individuals that can circumvent the rules and act on their own. That's a resource. Individual people making their own decisions and operating with their own autonomy, their own agency, their own ability to choose the future. That's a resource. And the more that's distributed decentrally to more people, the more powerful that resource becomes. That resource can distribute damning information online and not be hunted by the state. Those individuals can produce narratives and intellectual conflict based on their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own understanding outside of a predictive finance gang. But it's threatened by the mechanics of that finance gang. That resource of individual people having access to unfettered, uncensored information, that resource is constantly being limited and targeted. And it's not going to take long for the death of privacy here to result in the total conquest of everyone here, if it already hasn't happened. And the final vanishing frontier, which separates single humans from the unblinking gaze of police state politics, is nearly hopeless forever. And so too are nearly extinguished, once bravely held concepts like secret whispers between lovers, friends, protection from villainous corporate coordination, or plans for a future not forever strangled by conspirations between artificial intelligence and monopoly. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, there is an enemy, and I think that's the biggest calculation that needs to be distributed, is there really is an enemy. It's not a vague group of people with scales on their face that are hiding. It's not It's not comic book, even though it is comic book. It's not people wearing capes, people with sweet uniforms and swastikas. Oh, I gotta go. I don't know.